So before we get started, I need to show all of you this one thing. I've had like an undercut for like the past 2 years, and I've been growing it out just because I'm tired of it. And look what it's become. Look at this ridiculousness. It's like starting to grow out to be like this much. And I'm just letting it grow. I'm literally not doing it because like, who cares? But like, I'm realizing now that like from some angles you'll see this like weird sort of like inside out mullet action. You can't see it from here. Like this, look at this, look at this. Just goes to show how little I care about like anything nowadays. Oh my gosh, that sounds so bad. Stop touching your face. We're 3 weeks into distance learning at this point, and so you would think that after like almost a month you'd have like your routine all set and you'd kind of know what you're doing and you're like into like your own rhythm. But even 3 weeks in, there's some things that keep changing, right? So you know, most of you who've been reading the news know that like Zoom has come under some scrutiny over the past couple of days for security reasons, and so that has necessitated, at least on our school's part, kind of like a changing protocol, which I'm assuming that many other schools are also like, you know, dealing with as well. And you know, which sounds really simple to from like a very objective point of view, but when you think about like, you know, middle school, high school students who, particularly middle school, who like they thrive on routine, and then having to constantly change this routine, you know, in ways that can feel, that are new and can feel confusing, and it just seems so unideal. I feel like unideal is the one word I've been using to prop end all of my explanations of protocol updates to my students. It reminds you of how dynamic and subject to change everything is about what's been going on, and how much everyone who's involved in this is just kind of learning as they go. This is very much uncharted territory. So I'm trying to take things in stride, but at the same time, you also realize the reality of like burnout and getting tired, and like 3 weeks talking to nothing but computer screens and, you know, Google Classroom is a lot, and it kind of wears on you. And I don't think that's really something that's limited to teaching either. I've been reading a lot about like, you know, people in general talking about issues with like finding motivation to work, or like, you know, just, you know, feeling super burnt out by having to, you know, I think someone described it as being like, you know, you're constantly in touch with people over Zoom. We have the technology and the means to do that now, but like there's a certain sort of like lack that you're making up for, right? You know, in the absence of like actually talking to a human being, you're making up for that absence with like yourself. And so that's why we're feeling so exhausted from doing all this Zooming and, you know, conference calls or whatever. I mean, it really wears on you, and that manifests in like your, I don't know, lack in motivation, or just getting burnt out really quickly, or getting tired of what you do really quickly. And I've been feeling that for sure. I think I'm someone who's very prone to that. This whole kind of like unable to kind of get that like that sort of like push to get started on stuff. My to-do list is ridiculous, and there's a lot of guilt, I think, associated with that, like knowing that like, you know, you have so much to do, and realistically it doesn't take that much to go ahead and do it, but like lacking the sort of motivation kind of just do it, lacking that sort of like kinetic energy. Inertia is a real thing, guys. I don't know, maybe that in other words is just like the lament of the perpetual procrastinator, which is me. And I found myself coming face to face with that problem in a really funny way this week. So I have this plant, right? It looks like this. It's not an exciting looking, I got this at IKEA. I'm not good at keeping things alive in general, including like myself sometimes. I think this is like a type of succulent. It's one of those like plants that doesn't need a lot of water or maintenance or anything, and yet I still managed to like almost kill it. I've had this sitting on like my desk for a solid couple of years or so, and if I were to count the number of times I've watered this, it would probably, I would still have like fingers left over on my hands counting this. And so I hadn't watered this thing for like, I think upwards of 4 months, and I had started to see, far beyond like this week, I started to see like the leaves starting to wilt. Like this is still looking pretty wilty, but it was like looking like all like the leaves are bending over like 90 degrees. You can't see me. Bending over like 90 degrees. You know, I noticed this as early as like a couple of months ago, and I think every time I looked at my plant and saw it like slowly dying, the motivation for me to want to pick it up and walk it over to the bathroom and water it got lesser and lesser, which is hilarious because if you think about it, watering a plant under a sink literally takes less than 15 seconds. But for me, it was more kind of like constantly looking at my plant and seeing like not just a dying plant, but also like the sum of like my failures to keep alive a plant as a human being. maybe I'm looking too deeply into this. But anyway, the more I looked at my dying plant, the sadder I got and the less motivated that I got to kind of like keep it alive, even though the act of keeping it alive takes a little energy. And so I just kept this plant in its current sad state for like, you know, weeks, which turned into months. And just, you know, every time I looked at it as I was working, I'm just like, man, I'm just a plant killer. Like I can't even keep like a cactus alive. And all it would take for me is just to walk this over to the sink and just, you know, water it a little bit, and yet I can't manage. Man, I suck at life. And I think to myself how much of that really is an attitude that I also inflect upon my own life, right? Like that you look at the pile of work that you haven't yet done, or you look at all the stuff that like, you know, you haven't been neglecting or that you haven't been doing as good a job at as you want to. And the only thought that occurs to you is that like, man, this is so easy for me to do, and yet why can't I get myself to do it? Wow, that must speak volumes about my character, about me as a person, how much respect I give to my work and the people who depend on me. It just becomes this huge moral issue, when in fact all you really need to do is just walk your plant over to the bathroom and give it some water. On like some random Saturday, I wasn't feeling like particularly sort of like, you know, inspired by my dying plant, but I think it was just like a moment of, I don't know, boredom or random whatever. I just picked up my plant, walked to the bathroom, give it a little bit of water, and then just set it back on the windowsill where it still looked as dead as it did before. But after just one day, after just that like one little bit of water, it started looking, you know, a little bit more alive. And to me, I think that's kind of like, man, this plant is like really forgiving and understanding that, but at the same time, you know, it reminds us that like, sometimes all it takes is just a little random spark of energy to keep things going. You don't have to hype yourself up to take your parched soul to the watering hole and give it a little bit of juice. But sometimes, you know, it just takes a little bit. Don't overthink things too much. One thing that I also noticed was that like, despite the fact that like I watered my plant eventually, there's still parts of it that are looking pretty dried out, and I'm not sure if they'll like ever really recover from my negligence. These little bits here, look at that. It's like kind of sad looking. And I think that is a reminder of like, you know, maybe there are some, you know, sins about our procrastination, about our neglect, about our laziness that we can't really go back on, right? Like, you know, there's some things that are just, when they're gone, and we just kind of have to live with that mistake, right? But at the same time, that isn't the end of the story. It's not as if my entire plant is yellow and, you know, withered and dying, because at the same time, you see, ever since I like watered it on Saturday, there's some little sprouts that have been coming up along the sides too. So little victories and everything. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed my story about my failures as a amateur gardener. I hope you guys have been doing well. We are moving into spring break. Anyway, I hope everything has been going well on your guys' end, wherever you are, wherever you're working, whatever's happening in your life. It's been a tough week for those of us who are living in the Northeast and who are following the news, particularly those of us who are living close to New York and have people who we love and care about living in that area. It's just really tough times. And it's important to remember that, like, despite all that we've been doing to kind of distract ourselves and trying to keep positive, this is like a deeply traumatic time. You know, I encourage you guys to kind of like check in with yourselves and make sure that you're doing okay. Make sure that people who are around you are doing okay as well. And do things that kind of, you know, keep joy in your life in whatever ways that they can. I feel like in some ways it kind of feels sort of, I don't know, like frivolous to do so, considering like all the things that are happening in the world right now and how much hopelessness there seems to be. And it seems like any sort of push towards hope, towards happiness seems disingenuous. But sometimes, hey, we're just humans and we're weak creatures, and sometimes we just need distractions, right? And so I've been doing a couple fun things to distract myself. One of them is this vlog, but the other is a little fun thing that I've been doing on Instagram. If you've seen those kind of like 30 days of songs, memes, whatever, like most people are just kind of like posting songs. I'm singing my way through all of them because I'm extra AF. I'll link my Instagram handle over here if you are interested in me making an absolute fool of myself every day for the next 30 days. I hope you guys are doing well. Check in with you next time. All right, take care everyone. Bye-bye.